Welcome to Capital Call, Boyden's podcast series of conversations with private equity and venture capital firms from around the world.
We would like now to introduce our second episode of our Capital Call series with our guest, Cecilia Chao, Managing Director at Bain Double Impact Fund. We will talk more about value creation and measurement. So the first question I wanted to ask you, Cecilia, is how does Bain Capital Double Impact drive impact improvement in its portfolio company?
Great. We do this in two ways. We use a customized company-specific approach and also have a cross-portfolio approach using the B impact assessment. So on the first approach, really, we create a business blueprint to drive commercial growth, and we create these impact blueprints working closely with the management teams to develop a bottoms-up 5-year plan that helps identify a clear set of objectives and initiatives to deliver these social and environmental outcomes. And so for these company-specific metrics, we work with the companies identifying 2 to 3 specific impact metrics that are core to the company's impact potential. Oftentimes, these impact initiatives really do help to drive commercial growth as well. For example, having data demonstrating better healthcare and educational outcomes at lower cost really can also help attract additional customers, leading to better commercial success. So once we've established these core impact metrics, we create these 3 to 5 year forecasts for each impact metrics, which allows us to, and the companies, to set an ambitious plan and initiatives to deliver against those impact metrics, and while also driving commercial results.
Cecilia, would you mind to be great if you can give us an example?
Sure. So last year we invested in Broadstep, a provider of first-class behavioral health and supportive living services for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, with the goal of improving access to quality care while ensuring that the staff had meaningful career opportunities. What we were able to find was that through our investment and partnership, we reduced client incidents by 30% and ensured that 98% of the patients closely followed a personal care plan, which really helps to improve quality outcomes. And we reduced staff turnover by 9%. Right. So going back to the second aspect, using the B impact assessment, we use this B impact assessment, which is a survey developed by B Labs, a nonprofit organizations that scores individual companies across about 200 different questions, covering a range of ESG topics. And we're one of the few alternative investment funds that have chosen to create that kind of accountability and transparency by sharing our measurements on these scores annually to demonstrate the improvement across our portfolio companies. Last year, despite the pandemic, really, our companies leveraged our toolkits and generated almost 30% improvement in the B impact assessment score, which we're very excited and proud of our companies for achieving.
No doubt, you can be excited. But even though you work with this nonprofit organization, B Lab, you mentioned, so how do you translate those goals or measurements into actionable initiatives with your portfolio companies, for instance?
So we treat our impact goals just like the financial goals. We use the budgeting process to establish both the financial aspirations for the year, but also the impact objectives. And we tie management incentives to achieving these goals. All of our double impact portfolio companies have management compensation tied to their impact metrics.
Actually, you mentioned also before moving to the next question is that highlighting that Bain Capital Double Impact is actually one of the few alternative investment firms, right, which use a very rigorous approach, right? You mentioned about basically the B B impact, right? And then you also have the UN SDG, right, goals, and of course the Blue Way. So that's very rigorous approach. That was actually the question about talent and organization. So with regards to talent strategy, what is the critical leadership skill set required to drive growth?
So we have a talent blueprint that we find is core to building high performance organizations that really promote strong leadership, employee engagement, and an emphasis on culture and diversity, equity, inclusion. We really look to expand our leadership teams with the opportunity and adding the right expertise and capacity to scale the business. So importantly, leaders must have a growth mindset. And what do I mean by that? It's important that they both bring strong leadership and sector expertise, but also are great listeners and observers, enabling them to quickly respond and identify new opportunities and innovation, with new approaches when the market demands new solutions. I think a great example is recently we hired Piyush Jain to be CEO of Hand in Hand, a sustainably focused personal care company. Piyush brings not only 23 years of expert personal care experience coming from Unilever, but he also innovated and scaled Unilever's Love Beauty Planet product when he identified the need and opportunity in the market to have more sustainable oriented products to serve the consumer demand.
Cecilia, actually you hired an industry veteran, right? You mentioned also about growth mindset. Which major differences do you see between a classical PE-backed C-suite team and the one of an impact portfolio company?
One of the major distinctions that I see so far is this authentic and intentional desire to drive social and environmental outcomes. So an executive cannot solely be focused on the driving financial returns at all costs, but rather balancing an assessment across all key stakeholders, including not just financial returns, but also employees, communities, and the impact to the environment. But that said, I honestly think that the differences are beginning to converge, that all capital in the future will become what I like to call conscious capital. And so while a distinction exists perhaps today, I think that gap really is closing, especially as we move towards the future.
Thank you, Cecilia. With this, we conclude actually our second series of our Capital Call series and look forward to continue our discussion in the third episode. Thank you again.
Thank you for having me.
You've been listening to Capital Call, Boyden's podcast series of conversations with private equity and venture capital executives. To learn more about Boyden's private equity and venture capital practice group, visit www.boyden.com.